Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to configure Microsoft Teams direct routing with Cisco CUBE. So I'll go through the topology that we have. So I have a call manager here, right here, which is 172.160.160. It is running on 12.5 version, and it is having a trunk with your voice gateway, which will configure if not configured already. So it'll have a SIP trunk towards this voice gateway, and this voice gateway will have two interfaces. So one is towards the LAN and one is towards the WAN. So well, the LAN IP address is 172.160.200, and towards the WAN it is basically 192.168.1.200, which talks to the Wi-Fi router. The Wi-Fi router is 192.168.1.1. So basically the traffic gonna come through your call manager to the router, and from this voice gateway to the Wi-Fi router. So this is how the traffic gonna come. And on this particular router, we'll do the port forwarding to so that the traffic can go inside to this voice router whenever the traffic comes in from the Teams, right? So we'll do the port forwarding for 5060 and the UDP ports basically. Now here, this router will have two interfaces. So one is your LAN interface, which is going to be 1.192.168.1.1, and one is going to be your WAN interface, so which every router has. Now in my case, or in our case, or any case, right? So this WAN interface should have a public IP procured. Now, if you don't have a public IP with you, then most likely this setup not gonna work, because it needs public IP. So most of the service provider does dual netting or CG which we call it as, right? So that if even though if you try using some other methods as well, right, CG will if CGNAT is enabled, so this or dual netting is enabled, so this for port forwarding might not work. So in such cases, what you need to do is you need to get a public IP and assign to this interface. Now here there is a public DNS server, so which will use as hostinger in our case, right, where we are going to create a record where we are saying cube.uccollabing.online points to this WAN interface. So anybody trying to access cube.uccollabing.online should be pointing to this WAN interface of the Wi-Fi router, right? Now same here. Now the thing is that on the Microsoft Teams, what we need to do is we need to configure direct routing towards this router. So what we'll do is we'll add the direct routing gateway as cube.uccollabing.com, and which is technically going to point to this particular router's interface. So that's how it's gonna point. And here we'll have a cell phone or a desktop which will be connected, where it will be on the public network, and it will be running Teams on its system. And inside the network we'll have an IP phone which will be talking to these Teams and verify dual audio and everything if everything works well. So the basic requirement for this is you need to have public IP assigned to your WAN interface, right? Second is port forwarding on this particular router so that you can forward the signaling and media ports to the voice router. And then the important thing is you need SSL certificate for to be installed on this particular router. So this SSL certificate cannot be internal, it has to be an external certificate, which you can get it from GoDaddy or any other hosting provider. In my case, I'm not going to use this. I'm going to use the SSL for free, or some other certificate provider who is going to provide me the certificates for free for 3 months. But in production, if you're using, you need to get it from companies like GoDaddy, BigRock, etc., right? Namecheap, etc. Now next is we need to install ByteMost certificate and a DigiCert certificate on this particular router. And then the next thing is you need to have a DNS record, which I have already mentioned. Like in this server, you need to have a DNS record. And the next thing is, of course, the license, right? So whoever the users we are going to configure on the Teams needs to have proper license. So I'm not going through the license part here because this is something I've already covered in the past where we assign the licenses to the user. Now in this, we are just going to focus how do you configure the Teams direct routing. So this is the page you can refer. So I'll put this page on in the YouTube video link description, so that you can always refer to this particular page, and then you can copy the commands from here. So let's go and start with the configuration. Sorry. Okay. So let me bring the page here so that we can see the configuration. I'll increase the size. Okay, so let me run the command show IP interface. Right now we have only one interface, which is LAN 1. So as I mentioned here earlier, right, LAN 1 will have this interface and LAN 2 will have this IP address on this interface. So let's configure LAN 2. So we did configure the LAN interface. Now what we are going to do is we are going to point it to a default gateway 1.1, and I'm going to add a route 1.1. Now let's try to ping and see if we are able to ping the gateway. Okay, I'm able to ping the gateway. Let's ping 4.2.2.2. Sorry. Okay, I'm able to ping 4.2.2.2. Cool. So I'm able to reach to the internet at this moment, right? So let's start with the configuration. So first and the foremost, what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure IP domain name so that you can configure the domain here. And before that, you need to have the name server, because if I try to ping google.com, okay, so the name server is already there, so it is able to resolve. In some cases, right, where you're not able to resolve the name, so you might have to add the DNS entries on this router. So in my case, I'm able to resolve, so I'll not edit those entries. So let's add IP domain name, collabing.online. So this is the domain name which I've configured, IP domain name. UCCollabing.online. This is the domain name for this particular device. Now let's generate the RSA keys for the router. So what I'll do is I'll copy the command and paste it here. So let me make this small little screen a little smaller. Yeah. So it is able to generate the modulus. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the next command, IPSSH RSA key pair cube RSA. So this is basically a RSA key pair that you can use for SSH, right? So this is what I've done. Now the next thing what I have to do is I have to create a PKI trust point, and in this trust point I have to define like what is the FQDN subject alternative name, etc. Right? So in my case, I'm going to define the FQDN as cube.uccollabing.com. So this is the domain. This is the FQDN I wanted to put is it publicly, right? Cube.uccollabing.online. If you try to access this publicly, so this router, if I open up the HTTPS connection, so you will be able to see the router's web page. And in the subject alternative name, I'm going to put it as cube.uccollabing.com and OU as ID and O as uccollabing. So it is OU and O is not required. You can ignore it if you want, but if you want to generate it, you can generate it as well. But the important thing is FQDN and subject alternative name. So let's paste this. Okay, so I'm able to generate the create the PKI trust point here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to enroll this to the cube search store. So let's do that. So basically what this does is basically you are going to generate a certificate after doing this. So it says display certificate request to the terminal. So we'll say yes. So this means like before you do yes, right? Let me bring it a little here. So it says the subject name in the certificate will include cn.cube.ac.com OU and then O, and this is the subject alternate name that it is going to have, right? So so this means like you need to verify this. If in case this is incorrect, you have to go back to this step and regenerate your key pair, right? So we'll say okay, this information is correct, and display the certificate request. So it displayed your certificate request, right? So now this gives you the certificate. Now generally, if you see, the certificate will have the begin and the end line, but here when Cisco generates it, it does not have a begin and the end line, right? So what I'll do is I'll copy this now, and I can go to any of the website and can get it, basically add this end line, begin line, and end line. So let me show you this. So in this website, right, certlogic.com decoder, I paste the key. If I paste the key here, paste the certificate here and decode it, so it gives you like all the information, right? What is it related to the certificate, like a common name or OU, etc. All this information. Now, if I paste this, right, I can copy this right from here. So the begin certificate request and end certificate request comes here automatically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to go to 0SSL and generate my 90 days certificate from here for free. So I go here and create a new certificate. So once you do this, if you purchase a wildcard certificate, that means you have to pay for it. So since this is for testing purpose, I am not going to purchase a wildcard certificate. So I'm going to put it as cube.qccollabing.com. So this is the domain, this is the QDN that I'm going to use. So as soon as I enter this, so it says, okay, this name is valid. I click on next step. It says 90 days certificate on 1 year certificate. If you go for 1 year certificate, you have to pay for it. So I will be using 90 days certificate since this is for testing purpose. Now add-ons, it is asking for add-ons like you need unlimited 90 days certificate and REST API, etc. Right? You can use this if you want. Click on next. In the next, it says like auto generate CSR. We don't need to auto generate CSR because we are going to paste the CSR here. Now I'll say paste existing CSR. So I paste the existing CSR here. Click on the next step because this CSR we have received from the router. Now here, these are the plans, right? We are looking for the free plan, right? Click on next. Okay, so one step which I chosen because of which it is not giving us for free. So I uncheck this and then now go for the free. Okay, now it is asking me how do you want to validate your domain. Do you want to send an email verification, or do you want to upload any file to your hosting server, or do you want to edit DNS CNAME? So we'll say, okay, we'll go ahead and edit DNS CNAME. So the name should be like this. Okay, now we go to the hosting domains DNS server from where we have purchased this domain. We'll add this entry here. Go here, CNAME, paste this value, and then point this to we'll copy this and paste it here and make this a 3600 and record. As soon as we do this, it may take some time or it may be immediate. It depends on your DNS replication and etc. all the stuff. We'll click on next. So it says to start verify domain. We'll verify domain. So it says congratulations, your domain has been verified. This means that our system is issuing your certificate at the moment. Please, this page will refresh automatically every few seconds. So we'll wait for the certificate to generate. So now the certificate has been generated. So we'll download using the regular format, default format. We'll click on this download certificate and save it to our folder. Okay, so the file has been downloaded. I'll go to this folder where the file has been downloaded. I'll open this. and maybe I'll put it in a different folder inside it. Host certificate and paste it here. So once I do this, right? So this is your CA bundle and this is your certificate. This is basically your host certificate. So you should do cube.uccollabing.online, and this is going to be your root certificate. Now, if you look, there are total intermediate certificate and root certificate as well required. But I'm sure I'm going to hit an issue where I'm going to put this C bundle file, right? It might not accept this host certificate just by this, right? I might have to, get a root certificate as well in order for this file to work. But we can test this out. We'll see how to resolve this. Okay, let's go back here. Now we're done with this part at least. Now what we are going to do is, so we'll open this up. We'll say no here. Okay. Now this command will enter so that we can import the CS certificate. Let's go back here. So it is asking end with a blank line or the word with a quit. So what we'll do is we'll copy the C bundle from here. We'll open with Notepad. Copy this file. Copy this text. Paste it. So this is the actual CS certificate. Do you want to accept this certificate? We'll say yes. Okay. So this part is done. Now we'll try to import the trust certificate here. So basically, which means like the actual host certificate, right? So we'll try to see. So it is asking you to enter the certificate information. So we'll go here, open, copy this, and paste it here. Okay, so this certificate was imported successfully. So this means we have not encountered any issues. So this certificate was imported without any issue. That is good sign. Generally, in some of the cases, right, when you try to import the certificate, in some of the cases you fail to import the certificate because sometimes the root or the intermediate certificate is missing, because of which the router does not accept or does not like the certificate. But in our case, that was not the case, so it was able to import. Cool. So what we'll do here is we'll go to the next step. Now what we are going to do is we are going to proceed with this CUA and crypto signaling and the trust point information, right? So that we can trust the trust point for secure signaling. So we'll copy this two line, enter. Now the next thing, will enable the IP HTTP secure connection so that it can accept the newly imported certificate Cube Cert Store. Okay, so this is something we have done. Now what we are going to do is we are going to import the Baltimore certificate. So we have to enter this command. Okay, now we'll enter the command authenticate, where we have to import the certificate. Now we'll go back to this folder and then I'll right click, open with Notepad, copy and paste it here. Do you want to accept this certificate? We'll say yes. So this certificate has been imported to the trust point CA certificate accepted. Right, now we'll import the DigiCert Microsoft CA. We'll create a trust point and then import. follow the same process. We'll say yes. Okay, cool. So we are able to, basically import the certificate from here. So let's verify if HTTPS connection works or not, right? So what I'll do is I'll open up on my browser cube.uccollabing.online and see what happens. So I just opened cube.uccollabing.com. Now if you look at the certificate, let's see. So it says like cube.uccollabing.com is issued by 0SSL and is issued on 24th of December, so and so time, and it gets expired on 25th of March, right? So which means like our SSL, the router has accepted the SSL certificate. So the certificate part looks good at this point of time. Now let's do rest of the configuration so that we can, do our configuration related to for the teams. I'll go back here. Now what I'll do is I'll first and the foremost is what you need to do is you need to copy the SRTP encryption settings. So which is AES-CM 128 HMAC SHA1 80. So just to let you know, in some of the routers, old routers, or I would not say old router, but maybe the if you are into a previous version of the cube cube routers, right? So this command might not accept, so you might have to enter a different command, but in most of the latest releases you have to enter this command in order for to accept crypto ESCM 128 HMAC SHA180. What I'll do is I'll copy this. Okay, now the next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to define the SIP host URI for the communication. So in that case, the router FQDN is cube.uccollabing.com. So I put this. So this is the host name that will be used for the communication. Then I'm going to define the call manager IP address. So in my case, I have only one IP address, so I'm going to define only one. In your case, if you have multiple call manager IP address, then you can define more. So exit, enter the command. Sorry. Okay. So I did copy this and I have pointed. This is my call manager IP address 172.160.160. Now I'm going to put this command where I'm going to put the referred by to pass through without any modification. Okay. Then I define the voice class E164 map. So this is basically kind of a dialing pattern that is allowed in the dial pairs. So I'm saying like this is basically a dial pair towards a team which I'm going to use. So I'm saying like E164 pound followed by 91801010 dot dot dot. Okay. Now another dial pair I'm going to create. So that's gonna be used towards basically towards your call manager. So which means like from my teams, if I'm dialing for example 1000, the calls will come to the router, but the calls will always be prefixed with +91 in my case if I'm dialing from Teams. So since it is prefixed with +91, right? So this particular dial pair will be used in order to route the call to the call manager. And in the call manager, we have to handle this efficiently so that we can strip off +91 and we can route the call to the extensions. So which we'll discuss later. Now I'll copy this. So this is for the voice service VoIP where I'm putting trust list. This trust list is basically your Microsoft Teams trust list, and then your LAN and WAN interface, and then you define like what kind of RDP ports that you want to use. So you define all those, and then allow SIP connection to SIP connection, and some settings related to SIP. So which is I'm going to define here and paste it. Okay, it says like if you want to run this command, reload this router to change peak effect, which is fine. Now next thing which I'm going to do is I'm going to configure the codecs. Copy this, configure the codecs. Okay, now this part, right? So in my case, I'm not using my router with a public IP address. I'm using a Wi-Fi device as a public IP address. So if you look here, my router is behind the net. So which means this particular router is having the public IP address, but this voice router is behind the net. So the configuration which I'm doing is for typically for a situation where we are running the configuration where we are running the router behind the NAT, right? In such cases, this configuration will work. For configuration relate, if in case if your router is directly having a public IP address and talking to the internet, right? The configuration would be different for such cases, right? So, but in as I mentioned, like in my case, I'm running it behind the net, so I'm doing the configuration related to that. So let's go back here. So in this, what you need to do is you need to make sure you replace some of this information. Firstly, this one, right? So this domain, whatever cube.uscollabing.com you see here, if you're using it for your own use cases, right, you have to replace this with your FQDN. Second thing, you have to replace this as well based on the router model. If you're running a different model of router 4400 or something else, you have to replace this based on your configuration. Now this is something you can find it in Cisco documents where they mention like what kind of a model that you are running and what is the replacement that you have to do. Then in my case, this is my public IP address, right? So I'm going to, this is something that which you need to replace 49.207.248.64 with your public IP address. Same goes here as well. Here also you need to perform the same thing, but here you have to do one thing extra. Sorry, one more thing, right? So this IP address, what you see here is, so this is my basically interface towards the WAN. So this interface is basically this interface towards the WAN. Sorry, this interface. So what you need to do is you need to replace this particular IP address with your WAN IP address, whatever you define here, which is going to talk to the Wi-Fi router or the internet router, right? So you have to replace this with your router IP address. So in my case, we are using 192.168.1.200 as a WAN IP address on the router. So we are going to replace this with this. Now same goes here as well. You do the replacement where you see the public IP replaced with your public IP address. Where you see 192.168.1.200, you replace it with your router's WAN IP address on your Cisco router. You replace this with your correct model. I think that's it. Yeah. And here you replace with your cube.uscollabing.online with your actual FQDN. Same here with your WAN IP address and here with your router model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and paste it here. Okay, so this configuration is done. Now let's proceed further. Here, voice class server group 1, I'm defining the call manager IP address. So I'll put it here. Now I'll copy this, and in this I'm going to basically use the option skipper IP using TCP and TLS so that we can use it for active connections. Now I'm going to copy the tenant related configuration where you are providing some TCP TLS related configuration and where you're basically forcing the early offer and doing some manipulation using the SIP profile. Okay, so you need to make sure like you replace this particular cube.uscollabing with your actual FQDN. Right, so now here I'm doing some translation. So this translation is basically for the outbound calls towards team. So if I'm making a call, I'm going to send the call using a pound, and this pound will be stripped off on the gateway and it will be prefixed with a plus. So we'll take a look at the latest stage. Okay, now this part is done already. Now here are some dial pairs which I'm going to configure, right? So these dial pairs are related to the Teams dial pair. So where I'm putting preference 1, preference 2, and preference 3. Sorry, it should be preference 3. I'll change this. So where you're for the preference 1, you're sending the calls to sip.pst and hub.microsoft.com. For the preference 2, you will be sending it to this particular URL, and for the preference 3, you will be sending it to this particular URL, where you are also binding the interface. So this interface is nothing but your this interface IP address, your basically WAN side of your router's IP address, going towards facing towards the Wi-Fi router. And here in this particular dial pair, you're forcing SRTP to be used because we are going to use a secure communication between Microsoft Teams and this router. So you need to use SRTP. But when I talk about the call manager configuration, right, I'll not be forcing SRTP because we want to use plain simple non-SRTP, non-secure method, right? Now we are also doing some manipulation, calling the manipulation here, translation profile. And then we are also, instead of defining the destination pattern, we are using destination E164 pattern map here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this from here and paste it. Likewise here. And likewise here. Then this particular dial pair, what you see here is basically call from Teams. When a team sends the call, this is the dial pair which will be which will take more precedence, or it'll the calls will hit this particular dial pair because you're saying incoming URI 290, and you need to look into the URI 290 where you're doing where you're calling this particular URI. So let me show you 290. Yeah. So where you are basically, if the call is coming from cube.uccolabin.com, you're making that particular router hit that particular configuration. So I'll put this configuration here. Again, this communication is going to be secure because you're getting calls from Teams, so you're using SRTP. Now for this configuration, where you're defining the inbound calls from Teams, so where you're defining the configuration related sorry, inbound calls from CUCM. So as I mentioned, like the calls from the CUCM is something like we are not using a secure connection, so you're not using SRTP here, and this is going to be plain simple UDP. And second thing is, what you need to do is you need to bind the source interface as gigabit Ethernet 1. So Ethernet 1 is 172.168.200, which is going to be this interface, which will be talking to the call manager. Copy this. And this interface is basically for your outbound from the call outbound towards your CUCM. So where you are sending the calls to the team. The previous one was the inbound from call manager. So the call were coming from the call manager to the gateway. Now this is basically from the gateway sending the call to the call manager, where you're binding the interface 1. And session server group, as I mentioned, like it is the basically the IP address. Destination pattern is basically E164 pattern map and the codec here. So we'll paste the configuration here. So this is done. Now the last part here in this particular router at this moment is define the SIP UA. So this SIP UA is basically SIP user agent, where you are basically trying to reuse the connection, and you're basically doing the encryption of your signaling. Let's do this. Okay, so this part is done. Look at this connection. When we debug, let's see if there are any options being going back and forth from this router or not. Meanwhile, I'll run the command. Okay, we see some of the messages coming in. If you see here, these are the options being coming in from the Teams. Let's first see the dial summary. Okay, so it says like these dial pairs are active at this moment. So there is no issue with the dial pairs. So it is active. So it is able to reach to these Teams. Now we'll run the command. Connection TCP TLS. So if you run this command, it says like it is able to make the connection. Total number of active connection is 6. It is able to establish the connection with this particular basically router, right? So there is no issue with the connection. Now what I'll do is basically I will make a call. Let's go to the call manager and do the configuration on the call manager. Okay, I'm logged into the call manager. So first and foremost, what I'm going to do is before I create a trunk, I'll create a SIP trunk security profile. I'll name this as SIP trunk security profile. Or maybe what I'll do is I'll copy the existing one, make it as Microsoft Teams, and I'm going to use the UDP as an outbound. That's what we are using in the dial pair. If you look at the dial pair configuration, show run. Inbound from CUCM. So we are using transport type as UDP. So that's why we are using UDP here. So I'll save the configuration. And we are taking the calls on 5060, which is fine. I'll go here and create a trunk. So I'll name this, create this as SIP trunk, and then name this as cube. Cube to Teams. UCM to cube to Teams SIP trunk. Okay, you can define any information you want. Put the right device pool as per your requirement. So I'm not going to touch any of this. And then I'm going to, for the inbound calls, I'm going to use internal CSS for testing purpose, because this is something like my lab, right? So it depends, right, how you want to use it in your production. So production will be a little different than the lab. So I'm going to use internal CSS for the inbound calls and use the enable this checkbox, redirect diversion header, right? And then go down, check this redirect diversion header for outbound. And then here, put the Teams or cube IP address. So what I'm going to put here is 172.168.0.200, basically the trunk IP address from the call manager to this router. So this IP is what I'm going to put. Okay, 5060. We'll use the one which we have just created, Microsoft Teams, and for the SIP profile, we'll use the default one for now. And then save this. Once you save this, reset the trunk. Now I'll go here and create a route pattern. So in the route pattern, I'll define slash plus 91 dot bank, something like this. Let's say use it as internal partition and use the trunk which we have just used. Okay, and then yeah, I think no, we'll not do any digit manipulation here. For now, we'll just test what happens when you dial this number. Okay, so if you look here in my screen, my number which is on the Teams is plus 918010101001001. Copy this number and try to dial it from my Cisco SIP phone, and let's see what happens. Okay, here is my SIP phone. I'll dial this number. Before I dial, let's enable some debugging. And let's see if I'm able to get the call. Because on the team side, I've done required configuration. So which is something like I've already covered in the past videos when I did configure audio codes. So where I created a direct routing between the on the Teams interface.
Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please consult your directory and call again.
Let's do a NOR. Let's see why it is not able to dial the number. We'll see the configuration. So okay, so this call is from 1001 and it is trying to reach to this particular destination. And the incoming dial pair it is used is 100, right? And if you look 100 is this inbound from your call manager. So this dial pair was used when the inbound call came in. Now let's see if we see an outbound dial pair. No, we don't see an outbound dial pair, and we see a cause code value is 1, because of which the calls were disconnected, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for this particular call, I'm going to force something else so that the calls can go through, because in our manipulation we have used something in order to route the call to the Teams, right? So let's see. So what we have used here, on to CUCM. Now let's see the configuration here. Outbound to Microsoft Teams, and here we have used destination E164 pattern map 200. Let's see what this pattern talks about. Okay, this pattern talks about this particular way, how this is how the call it is supposed to route. So let's try sending the call in this particular format and see what happens. This is how the call is Cube is expecting this call to be on the router. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a pre-dot. So if I do a pre-dot, let me do a pre-dot here. So which means if I do a pre-dot, it is going to remove plus here and then prefix pow and see what happens. So if I dial this number now, this plus will be removed and it will prefix a hash here. Let's see. So if you see here, I'm getting a call on my system. I'll end the call for now. If you look here, the call which I made, the call came from 1001 and the call came as %23. So if you convert this hash to a value, right, it becomes %23. So it might be an ASCII value or something. I don't remember the exact term of it, but if you so every value like star will have a different value, pound will have a different value. So pound states means percentage 23 means pound. So we are sending pound followed by 918010, whatever the number is, and this call came from the interface dial pair 100. So if you look here again, we'll go through the same configuration. Dial pair 100. So the call did hit this particular dial pair using the UDP protocol, and they landed on this router. So once the call landed, it is going to choose an outbound dial pair. So now if you look here, outbound dial pair, it has chosen 201. Now let's see what 201 means. 201 means that it has taken the dial pair towards Teams. So which means this is the dial pair that it has taken, where we are saying, okay, any destination pattern, this particular destination pattern, you have to choose when you're routing the call. When you search for this particular destination pattern, so you're saying if the call comes with this particular pattern, then you route the call. So this is the destination number you've given here in this particular dial pair. Now let's see further. If you scroll down, this particular, if you remember, we send the call as pound followed by 91801001 and the number, but the pound was stripped off on the router. Let's reiterate. So if from the call manager, we send the call as plus 91 and did a pre-dot so that it can remove plus and prefix pound. So the number technically becomes pound 91 followed by the number when it reaches the gateway. So if you look here, when it reaches the gateway, it becomes pound 91801 followed by the number. When it did hit the outbound dial pair, it removed the hash, it removed the pound and converted the pound to a plus. Why did that? Because we have added some manipulation here. Let's go back here. So if you look here, we did some manipulation using translation profile. Now let's look at the translation profile. So if you look here in the translation profile, what we are seeing, if the call comes with a pound, then and followed by the number, right? You remove this pound and prefix a plus. That is the reason it has removed the pound and prefix a plus, and we are calling this particular profile in the dial pair that we are talking about in these three dial pairs. That is why the call landed onto the Teams as plus 91 followed by the number. Now my Teams has this number plus 918010111, right? Now what I'll do is I'll try to enter this call on my cell phone and see if there are two ways audio. So let me log in to my cell phone, which is not going to be in a home network, but it is going to be in 5G network. Let me log in to my cell phone Teams. Okay, so I have connected my Teams on my cell phone, which is on 5G network. Now let me try making a call again and see if I am able to hear to my audience. Okay, it's ringing on my cell phone. Let me answer the call on my cell phone. Now what I'll do is I'll mute on my Cisco IP phone, which is this Microsoft phone, and talk on the Teams and see if I hear audio. Hello, hello. Okay, there is audio. Now I'll mute on my Teams and answer the call on my Microsoft phone and see if I hear two-way audio. Hello, hello. Okay, so I'll end the call. So there is two-way audio at this moment, right? So this is what I when I make a call to the Teams, I hear two-way audio. Now let's do a debug. Now we'll make a call from Teams to the call manager and see what happens. It says we could not complete your call. Okay, so the reason why we are not able to complete this call because of the policy that has been assigned on the Teams. So let's go back to the Teams and see what is the policy that has been assigned. I'll open up Teams. So this is my Teams here. So before I let me show you the policy right now for this user. Go here in the policies. So I see I've assigned only local voice routing policy. So let me assign an international voice routing policy because local does not, in the local calling right, I'm not given this rule to dial out the number. Because if you look here, I go here in the direct routing and the voice routes, the local dialing policy only allows this dialing, whereas international allows everything else, right? So let me show you this configuration. I go here, voice routing policy. So there are two voice routing policy which I have created. One is local voice routing, local VRP and international VRP. So in the local VRP, we have assigned PSTN usage as SBC calls. In the international VRP, we have assigned international as a PSTN usage. Now I go here in the direct routing. I open the voice route, select the international, and if you see international has PSTN usages international. So because since I have only local calling rights, right? So which is taking the SBC calls as a PSTN usage. And if I dial only calls with 6 followed by the number, then only the call will go through. Any other calls apart from this number is not gonna work. So for testing purpose, what I can do is I can use this pattern since I have basically local calling right? This pattern does not allow me to dial. Either I can change my policy or I can update this pattern for testing purpose. So I can do either way, right? Since this is the lab. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my policy from local to international. Okay, I just changed. So it meetings take some time for the policies to take reflect. I can dial immediately. Most likely the calls may not work immediately if I dial, but we can try. It didn't work, so we'll have to wait for some time so that this call can work. Okay, now let's make a call now and see what happens. So I'll dial 1001 only. Okay, so the call came into the queue. Let's do an all. Okay, so the call, if you look at here, we made a call to 1001, but Teams has prefixed the country code as well, +91, followed by the number that I have dialed, right? And this call is coming from this number. Okay, let me restart this again. But before I restart, let's go through the logs. Now, if you look here, the call has come from this number, which is assigned to the Teams here. And I made a call to 1001. and the Teams has prefix plus 91 as the country code. And let's see which interface did it hit. It did hit the dial pair 3. Let's see what dial pair 3 talks about. Dial pair 3 talks about inbound calls from Teams. So which uses incoming URI 290, which is the cube.uccollabing.com, the host, and basically your tenant configuration. Now let's go further and see what is the outbound dial pair that it has taken. So it has taken outbound dial pair is 101. Let's see what 101 is. 101, if you look, it says outbound to CUCM. So it has correctly taken the outbound towards CUCM. Now let's dig further. Right? I'll keep this aside. Let's go slowly. Now the call has come from this. And if you look here, when the incoming call has arrived, it is looking for a destination number as plus 91 1000. But my SIP phone is assigned as 1001 only. So which means if it is looking for plus 91 1001, it is not able to find this number because my extension is 1001. So let's see what is the error code that we see here. Oh, it did not give me any error code. Looks like it is taking a loop. Why it is taking a loop? Because if you remember, plus 9 and plus 9 we did create a route pattern for the incoming calls, right? For the outbound calls, right? So it is creating a loop because of which the calls are, um, basically, going back from the call manager to Cube again. And let's see further. And after that, we receive a disconnect tone, right? You see this? So it is creating loop. So again, from the call manager, the call is going back to the cube, and from the cube, the calls are disconnecting. So we need to handle this correctly. So why are we not able to trigger or handle this properly now? Now, if you look here, when the call did hit this particular dial pair, the next dial pair it did hit was 101, call towards your call manager, and it is taking a destination pattern map as this, right? Now there are multiple ways of handling it. Either we do the manipulation on the cube so that it can fix the issue, or we do the manipulation on the call manager so that it can fix the issue on the call manager itself, right? So let's see where we can do the manipulation on the cube and see what happens. So right now, if you look here, it is using a destination pattern as this. So let's see. So here the calls are going correctly to the call manager. Now let's use some manipulation here so that the plus 91 is stripped off here itself, and then it can basically route the call further to the call manager using extension. Okay, I'll go to the cube and do required configuration here. Let me restart the session. Oops. Okay, so I've created a pattern for this. So what I'm saying is voice translation rule, let's say true, and the rule is any call coming into that particular translation rule and starting with slash plus 91, you strip off the plus 91 from there and not the call. And then we'll say voice translation rule call to. So we are calling this rule here. And then we are basically calling this rule, this particular rule or this particular profile here in the dial pair. So let's go and do this. Oops, the syntax is incorrect. Let me recheck. Okay, I've got the correct rules now. So this is how the rules should look like in order to remove /+91 and convert it to the extension. So I'll copy this. Okay, paste this here. So we are calling this particular rule here, rule number 2. And then finally on the dial pair, we'll call this. Okay, debug. Now let's see by making a call. Where is my Teams here? I'll make a call to 1001. Okay, I'm getting a call. I'm able to answer this as well. So which means if you look at here, I think I did not do a turn monitor. Let me do that. Let's try it again. Okay, so we turn on. So let's go back to the logs here. So the call came from the Teams as this number, and it was looking for +91 1001. It has taken the dial pair 3. In our case, the dial pair 3 is going to be this one, the inbound call from Teams, right? Now, when the call came in, now it is going to check the outbound dial pair. So it has taken 101 dial pair. So 101 is this. So I'll modify this configuration where we have applied the translation rule. So we did apply this particular rule here in this particular dial pair. So which means this dial pair is towards team, which is where we are binding the interface one. Sorry, this dial pair is towards call manager, and where we are binding interface one, and we have defined the destination pattern as pound followed by the number. So if you look at this particular destination pattern, it'll say, sorry, it is +91 1 followed by the number, right? And now here we are sending it to call manager. So now what we are doing here is we have applied this rule, translation profile outgoing remove 91, and this rule is basically calling this translation rule here. So where we are stripping off 91 and sending the call back to the call manager. So this is how we are achieving. And now if I go down, so if you look here, earlier the call was +91 1001 here. Now if you look here, when the call did go out from the cube to the call manager, it looked for 1001 because it has taken a match with a pattern, basically a translation rule, and that translation rule has removed your basically +91 from the digits, right? Okay, so this is how the outbound calls from the Teams to the call manager is working. Now, if you want to do simultaneous call routing, you have to use the same logic where you are sending all the calls from the call manager to Teams via remote destination profile and remote destination, right? So this is how you need to do. Going back to the Teams, I just wanted to quickly show you what is there in my direct routing. In my direct routing, I've added this as cube.uccollabing.online on the port 5061, and the SIP connection is active. Where if I go back to the settings here, so this is the setting it looks like. So enable the SBC, port number, send SIP options, and rest of the settings here, right? And this particular call, when I'm dialing this out, so I'm using this particular voice route to dial out from Teams to call manager. So let's test again. We made some changes. Let's test again both the scenarios. So one, I'll make a call from Cisco IP phone to or third-party SIP phone to Teams and see if the call goes through. Okay, I'm getting a call on Teams. I leave the connection and then place a call from Teams to Cisco IP phone and see. Okay, so both ways the calls are working, and let me show you the port forwarding that I have done on my router. Okay, so this is how my port forwarding looks like. So I've done a port forwarding. So 5067 is not required, so it was used for testing purpose. So you can turn it off. So I'm using 5061. 443 is not recommended to open on the public network. So this is just to show you by accessing the cube.uccollabing.online publicly and wanted to show you if I'm able to reach to this interface. And next is your basically the UDP port. So sorry, the media ports which I have enabled on the external interface and pointing it to the router's interface here, 1 into 168.1.200. So this is how the port forwarding looks like. So what I'll do is I will take up the latest configuration and paste it here on the on my blog here, and you can refer to this configuration, and then you can use this configuration for your requirement purpose and modify it as per your required way, right? I hope this video is informative for you. Thank you for watching.